Good afternoon. This is a special meeting of the Grosse Ile Fire Commission. We will be conducting 2 interviews this afternoon, but before we start, if we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, we appreciate those showing up today for this interview process. Obviously, this is a special meeting for the Fire Commission. 2 applicants have been passed to the Fire Commission to consider for the opening of our fire chief from Township Management. Township Management has provided us certain questions that they would like us to follow, and the commissioners have that in front of them. Essentially what we're going to do is we're going to have an applicant come up and we'll alternate the questions from commission member to commission member to commission member to commission member, and then we'll just go back to the start again. So all of us have the opportunity of asking the questions that have been provided to us. 2 things will not happen today. One, this isn't really a public comment setting. This is really just an interview process, just so happens to be being televised in this room, as well as we will make no determination today. Supervisor Kelsey is not here today. He would like to be part of this discussion because our commission being so small, we had indicated that we would do that for him. So obviously the board wants us to move forward with a recommendation. We will do that in advance of their next meeting, but there won't be any recommendations or motions taken tonight. Is there anything else from the commission that I haven't thought of or you want to bring forth to the public?
Mr. Chair, it's my understanding that the Township Board is planning on having a special meeting on Thursday, and that they would like to have a recommendation before that time.
All right. Well, today's Tuesday, so if necessary, we'll meet tomorrow as a commission.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Anything else? All right. The first applicant is in the audience, Mr. Densmore. If you could come to the podium, please.
Your agenda has public comment on the agenda for today.
All right. We can do it. All right. We can put that at the very end of the agenda if you want. Good evening, or good afternoon.
Good
Sorry.
afternoon,
Your first name, last name, just for the application process.
Sure. First name is Stephen. Last name is Densmore.
All right. So as I indicated, we have a set of questions. I think you've already kind of gone through some of these questions when you were screened with the first vetting.
Yes, sir.
So what we'll do is we'll start to the right of me and with Trustee Bletcher, and we'll just go through these questions. And at the very end, if there's any questions that the commission has that are off this template, then we'll do that.
Okay.
Makes sense, Carl?
Good afternoon, Mr. Densmore. Carl Bletcher. I'm the liaison from the Township Board to this commission. The questions that we're asking today include: where did you learn of this job, and why do you have an interest in this position?
Sure. Good afternoon, sir. I saw your advertisement on social media and also on Indeed.com where you had posted it. I come from a long history of a firefighting family, and I'm getting near or able to retire from my current employer, and I believe this would be a good fit for myself coming up to the ranks of the fire department.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Stephen. You may recall I was on the initial interview team, and I had the pleasure of interviewing you.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us what skills, abilities, knowledge that you would bring to the department, and why you think you might be the best candidate?
Sure. I originally started out my firefighting career back in the late 80s with the City of Brighton Fire Department as a volunteer firefighter. Worked there for approximately 12 years, from volunteer to paid on call, and worked my way up to actually becoming a sergeant on the on-call fire department. My family comes from a traditional rich background of volunteering in the fire department. I was given that lesson from my parents from a long time ago. And I've always said, once I chose the career to become a firefighter and try and get hired up in a career fire department. After I received my education, I was fortunate to get hired in 1996 by the City of Melvindale Fire Department, where I obtained the rank of probationary firefighter, worked myself all the way up from the probationary firefighter to senior firefighter, sergeant, lieutenant captain, and then chief of the department for approximately 2 years. At that particular time, the mayor of the city of Melvindale, Mayor Bosman, he came to me and said that the fire department could no longer exist and we needed to do a merger with the city of Dearborn. So I had to work tightly with the union there and the association to figure out what we're going to do to still provide ambulance service and fire service to the citizens of Melvindale. And that was in agreement with the mayor's office and both mayor's office, city of Dearborn, and also the city of Melvindale. So fast forward, after a year, we were able to combine and actually merge the two fire departments together. I was given the opportunity to become the assistant chief, which I currently hold in the city of Dearborn now, under Joseph Murray, who is my direct supervisor with the fire chief. So that's kind of in a nutshell how I became from the city of Brighton all the way up to Melvindale and also into Dearborn. Through my tenure of working with both cities, I've obtained many certifications, hazardous materials. I was on the Downriver Hazardous Material Response Team for several years, second in charge there under Chief McCurr. Firefighter, obviously Firefighter 1 and 2, state of Michigan, paramedic. Also hold Fire Inspector 2 and also plans examiner through the National Fire Protection Association, as well as your inspector there, your marshal, I should say. I'm able to ICS 3 and 400 instructor. I also have NIMS 1 through 8, minus 5 and 6 because they don't exist currently. Many COBRA certifications through hazardous materials. That was the direction when I was put on a team from Melvindale. They needed somebody to fill that position. Very familiar with the Downriver Mutual Aid System. The city of Dearborn still belongs to the city of, or the DMAC. And I actually represent Melvindale on that side when we come to meetings and stuff that would go forth through any votes or anything that would need to be done. I take those back to the city of Dearborn as far as mutual aid dues and that type of situations. Other education I have, I'll have my bachelor's degree here in approximately 2 weeks through Siena Heights. I'll be graduating with that. That's all I believe I can think of at the moment. Sure.
What's your familiarity with Grow Seal? So what do you know about Grow Seal and a little bit of history of Grow Seal? What do you have that you've seen, and what can you tell us about our island?
Sure. So Grow Seal is a very unique situation as far as the residency and being on an island. You have a beautiful airport here. They would be able to bring different municipalities in for any emergencies that we have or that you may concur. From what I've read and actually worked with and experienced a little bit with on the hazmat side, they have a wonderful fire department, very progressive what I've seen, nice equipment. Air Force Base here, I believe, was determined in 1846. I believe so. Wonderful downtown, have a township manager, have a township supervisor as well. Derek is the financial guy along with head of the DPW. Let's see here. Approximately 10 to 12,000 people, depending on the last census you looked at. Had some issues trying to find that. Downtown Development Authority, beautiful place to live. Yeah.
All right, appreciate it.
Sure.
Kurt?
Hi, Mr. Densmore.
Hey,
Kurt
sir.
Corneffel here. Obviously, Grow Seal is more than just one island. In fact, as many as 14. Some of them uninhabited. How would you look upon that as far as how you would access those islands, and do you have any marine experience with a marine rescue? Grow Seal, in fact, does have that capability, so is that something that you've ever done in your career?
I've worked with a little bit with the Coast Guard here around the area when we were on the mutual aid team with different scenarios that went in. We had a couple oil tankers scenarios, that type of thing, that the runoffs would be. We deployed boom in the different areas as far as the hazmat team. I understand you have a fire boat here. I've seen it and it's working. The members here have been great when we were in need of it to help us out. Even though it would not be an inhabitable island, it would still need to be taken care of. So we would look at our mutual aid partners, the Coast Guard, Fish and Wildlife, conservation officers, that type of thing, to deploy any assets that we might need to mitigate a situation that would involve one of those islands that would not be ready available to get to.
Do you see any special obstacles, challenges, how to access these different places on Grosse Ile, i.e. the islands? And have you thought about any of that, or is that?
Sure. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
go ahead.
Sure. And if we needed to deploy some apparatus as far as boats or through our mutual aid partners, we would use those. And like I had mentioned, the department has some resources that we could use to get into those by looking just at different maps and stuff, not actually physically going out there, but looking at different aerial maps of the area and stuff. I would certainly rely on past experience of members in the audience of the fire department to help gauge that type of situation to be a learning experience for all of us.
Have you been all through the island, all the different out islands that you can drive to? Have you been all through the community, looked at all these so far?
Yes, sir. I've done several passes through the main area and outside the area here.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Working with elected officials, can you give me 3 examples of positive experiences you've had?
Sure. Actually, when I'm not a firefighter, I actually sit on the City of Melvindale board or City Council. I was elected twice there, so I have a total of 8 years of experience. I see both sides of the asking side and the receiving side as far as business goes for running a city. Positive experiences is knowing exactly what's happening with budgets and not just getting something in the on your desk, knowing the wheres and what's behind that kind of stuff. Being able to participate and make changes in the city and or a township that would have different unique situations, such as we had talked about different islands, different city avenues, paving, road infrastructure, that type of stuff.
3 negative experiences when you've been working as either the chief in Melvindale or the assistant chief in Dearborn, vis-a-vis fire department.
So you have to be careful what you ask for sometimes. When you ask for things, you need to follow through. And if you don't follow through with those things, there can be consequences. And I've seen that on the other side and witnessed that firsthand. You can make beautiful presentations, and if you go ahead and put things out that you think is good for the community or good for the area, and you don't involve the community or members of the departments, they can come back and it can be a negative impact on the community if you didn't do your proper research.
Thank you.
As you know, we're primarily a volunteer department.
Yes, sir.
Have you had any experience dealing with a volunteer department, and also, in your opinion, what are the similarities and what are the differences between the two?
So I had, growing up in a family that was showed, volunteerism was very important, and then getting on a volunteer fire department, and being a member of an association for many years. I see the difference between the management part of it and also the association, how they need to work together and collaborate to move forward. Volunteer firefighters and paid-on-call firefighters or career firefighters, we do the same job. There's no difference. We put our stuff on, they put their stuff on, it's the same thing. I received a lot of training, ground root training when I first started out in, obviously, the volunteers, which has kept me going through all the years, and I've often fell back on that kind of training. The members that it actually took me under their wings at that particular time, I owe my career to them because they made me who I am today as far as my knowledge-based, structural-wise, and knowing how to work with communities that may not be able to afford a full-time fire department, and what some of the challenges and what you might need to take care of and help move everything forward with everybody's commitment to serve the community.
All right, obviously, Grosse Ile has a volunteer fire department. You indicated that we have roughly 10 to 12,000 people on this island. You've been involved with volunteer fire department as well as paid-on-call plus career. What would you do to help grow our department on this island? How would you help secure additional volunteers to help the cause of the firefighters that are already in place?
Being involved in the community, I think, is the number one priority. The more we can advertise our fire departments, get members interested, whether that's going to the schools at an early age, going to the schools when they're in high school, hoping to maybe get their career path if some of them are undecided, what we can do for them, and just introduce the fire service, what it's all about, and how it can be positive to give back to your community. There's a lot of community gains that you can do. You can make yourself, I understand you have your Island Fest. You have different programs. Get the fire department out there, get them noticed more, and be that department that people want to come to. When they see the trucks go down the road, they're like, yeah, I want to be on that truck. And that comes with the members too. They're the integral part of the department. Working with them and getting going and growing that department and just exposing ourselves, whether it's on social media. There's good things about those. Advertisements. And it's even actually going to colleges too, not just the high schools. It's getting to colleges where, they've graduated from that fire academy and they just so happen to live within the area or on the island themselves, attract them. And you can do that by education, getting them some education that maybe they couldn't quite afford. And we could bring some instructors in or send them away if the budget would allow it, and to get some more of that advanced training.
You know how many volunteers we have on the department right now?
I'm going to say approximately 20.
Following up on Kurt's line of questioning there, part of every successful manager is to bring along other people in their various disciplines. Have you had much successful history in doing that where you've been in the past, where say you had somebody that showed some promise and you've helped bring them along, and has that been part of your job description or part of what you did?
Yes, sir. So I currently hold the rank of assistant chief, as I had mentioned, within the Dearborn Fire Department. I've worn many hats within that division as far as purchasing of apparatus, station improvements, community outreach, and one of the bigger ones we have that I was in charge is the apparatus. We have to have a certain amount of people in charge of the apparatus, no matter what time it is, day or night, to help service those if they break down, if the mechanic is not available. So the long-term battalion chief who actually oversaw that department retired, and it was up to my responsibility to find a replacement for him within what they call the FASA division of the department, which is basically the fire apparatus supervisor assistants, and there were 6 of them. So it was chosen that those 6 individuals would once hopefully become the apparatus chief, as we call him, for the fire department. So I had several interviews with some of the candidates that were interested in that. And once I had talked to the fire chief, and we had making a decision to my recommendation, we had chose one, and then that was his start of actually shadowing the other chief before he retired and pushing him into the schooling that he needed to go. And to this day, he's a fantastic replacement for him. He's very mechanical, and I saw the need right away, just some stuff that he would step up and do without being asked, and make the department go progressively better. So I've had him and a couple other gentlemen in that route in that FASA division, and also the EMS chief as well.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
What do you see as future trends in the services the fire department provides? And I want to start off by noting that we recently had an offer to join Central Dispatch, South Wayne County, and this township board rejected that, and the police commission rejected it. Where do you stand on Central Dispatch?
So I'll first start out on the Melvindale side when we first decided to become on the 800 system. We were a standalone department and never joined, which is now what they refer to as the Central Dispatch, because it was just too, what they referred to, clunky at the time, and it was very expensive for the initial startup. So our police department, or Melvindale Police Department, was actually our dispatchers. Then we worked very well with them. So then, hindsight, a few years later, we moved over to Dearborn, where it was a much larger department, obviously with one department with several dispatchers. Just because of having several dispatchers in there doesn't mean that your calls are going to get answered, because they all could be on the busy side as well. Attending some of those meetings, as far as you'd mentioned about the dispatch that you folks voted down, there's positives to being a smaller type community where your radio traffic and your communications, you're talking to one person. I found in my time that communications can get lost on bigger sides. It truly comes down to what the residents want and what the township board feels is the best. There's always been different scenarios where people that are calling 911 on the island and somebody's answering it 20 miles away, are they actually going to know exactly the same streets as a dispatcher who was here earlier, perhaps their entire career, knowing the streets and ins and outs and knowing, the residents that are there. So depending on the direction that this board would go, and obviously you voted it down, it would be, obviously if you're looking for a support or something, I would support that, staying a local area where you're dealing with the people that you have grown and known and is able to take care of business in a timely manner without questioning, different response times, or perhaps getting a Smith Street mixed up in Dearborn compared to one maybe on Groves Hill, or that type of thing.
You were involved in the merger between Melvindale and Dearborn Heights, or Dearborn. What did you do to protect the people that you had worked with for a number of years in Melvindale?
So the first thing we needed to do, once we decided, I say we, both cities decided this is the direction we were going to go, I had to look out for when I say my people, was the people the firefighters. But I'd like to call them, mine, because I was proud of when I was the chief of what we had accomplished and what we did. And being a small department of only 16 individuals, it was more like a family than it was we'll say a business. So you would go to the birthday parties, you would go to the weddings and stuff. So I felt a vested interest to make sure that they were taken care of. And believe it or not, when this came through, we had to get both unions together and figure out how we were going to do, if people were going to get promoted before other people, this type of thing. And both the union presidents at the time actually had figured out through the association that the firefighters, the career fighters belonged to, was to zipper everybody in. So a senior captain in Melvindale might jump a senior captain in Dearborn just by the time of date that he was hired of some sort. That's kind of how they pushed it through, as a date of hire or different seniority marks, if they're from the military or not. And that worked well. And nobody got hurt, nobody got laid off, nobody lost any employment, no monetary issues there. I was the last one to go. I felt I could do my side with myself as far as trying to figure out what they were going to do with me and figure out. So I always put the members first, got them on the board, ready to go, and then I worried about Steve with several meetings such as this coming in front of both boards, figuring out, because at that time they did not have an assistant chief position in Dearborn, so they actually perhaps had to create one to bring me over as to being employed, as the city. So we were able, once we made the presentation, I was able to secure that position and take some of the burden off the fire chief as far as daily operations of the fire department.
One of the driving forces for any merger is savings, either savings through reduction in need for equipment, perhaps buildings and personnel. How did you accomplish savings with that merger?
So on the career side, the savings right off the bat was with workers' compensation. The city of Melvindale was no longer, I would say, on the hook or in charge of any type of anything in workers' compensation. They had issues with trying to fund equipment. I can remember several times going in front of a board simply asking for replacement of tires on a fire engine, and the money really wasn't allocated in the budget. So I had to work desperately with the financial manager to figure out where that money was going to come from and how it was going to be replaced. Cost savings to the residents, their ISO rating, which is their insurance part of it, actually went down a little bit, so it saved them some money in there. Instead of providing 2 paramedics, or if it was a serious enough call where we had 4 on the scene, with Dearborn, they automatically send 4. Doesn't matter what the call is. Now, obviously, maybe back up. If it's maybe a slip and fall, a broken ankle, then obviously, if the ambulance is out of position, the fire engine will go and hold it down until they get there. I was only able to put 2 paramedics on the scene because it seemed like we were getting busier and busier. When the ambulance went out, the fire engine went out as well. We were able to basically do a roll of 2 calls at the same time. So that was a challenge that I had to call a lot of times mutual aid to Allen Park or to the city of River Rouge for their ambulance because we only had 1 and it was tied up. So on the Dearborn side, they have multiple ambulances, 5 fire stations that one ambulance could come out. So it was actually a benefit for the residents because they wouldn't have to wait as long as on mutual aid if it needed to be called.
I'm good.
As is the case with many service-type industries, things change all the time, and we have to adapt to changing circumstances. Can you give me some examples of how you have guided changes needed to provide the fire services? Any innovations?
Sure. One of the bigger ones is as you may or may not know, Dearborn is one of the largest Arabic communities basically in the country. And we had to do something rather quickly because of language barriers that we were having within the fire department responding to calls. So under the direction of Chief Murray and myself, we were able to approach the colleges in the area of Dearborn and try and get the firefighters in a timely basis if they were wanting to learn to speak a different language. That system has worked well. There are several that have taken us up. We are now actually hiring more firefighters that actually speak it fluently with a kind of a recruitment drive that we had in order to take care of the citizens in a timely manner without having to wait for a language barrier or pick up a phone and call that 1-800 number to assist to figure out what's going on, or rely on a family member to do that as well. Changing in the fire service can be a good thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing. But I believe with the technology and stuff that's out there and the willingness of the members, change would be a good thing. It's advancement, it's education, it's potentially more equipment through grants. It's the whole world's out there to explore. It's just we need to figure out how we would fit and what we would need to make the department better or more of a progressive, not that they're not progressive now by no means, but to move forward to make it a great department, a greater department than it is today.
Well, Grosse Ile's had a long-standing fire association. They're incredible to see what they've done over the years, as well as the camaraderie between both the men and women. How does the chief interact or interface with the fire association on Grosse Ile?
I would say 100%. That relationship needs to be there. It's a driving force between both entities, both the fire chief and the association, to make sure we serve the community, because that's what we're here to do. As far as putting things out there, the chief needs to be supportive. I'm sure the association will be supportive of the chief for different things, but they need to go hand in hand. And if that's not there, then that's where you always have issues. I remember being on the association many years ago in Brighton, but the chief at the time and the association worked hand in hand. Things went very smoothly. There was respect on both sides. If there was any differences, they were talked about. They were alleviated, and it was usually only just under what we feel is the communication part. Once it was understood, the issue went away. But yes, both of that relationship needs to be there 100%. Otherwise, we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. That's serving the community.
Is it your thought that they should be separate, distinct, or should the chief be a member of the fire association?
I would say probably be separate from it, just so they could see if there's any issues that need to be taken care of, whether it be like disciplinary actions or a voting thing where the chief has never been involved in that type of thing, and just know that they respect each other's boundaries that are there, and to move forward with that.
Kurt?
Do you know, or on a first-name basis, with the various chiefs of the departments that are part of mutual aid?
For the downriver, sir? Yes.
You know them all?
There's been some changeover in the last few months and in the last year, but I know several.
Are you familiar with the strengths and weaknesses of the different departments?
Just what I've seen or what I've witnessed maybe on mutual aid type calls.
Do you have any concerns about getting the various mutual aid participants to help when a call comes out?
No, sir.
Have you ever had any problem with that?
No, sir.
All right.
And may I make just one more comment on your question there?
Sure.
So that would be exposing our fire department or Groseville Fire Department to training with other departments that are in the area. That's how members get to know, if they don't know them already, the working relationships that we have instead of 3 o'clock in the morning kind of introducing yourself. Many of these gentlemen behind me have been on the department for years. They probably have known many more chiefs than I have since 1996 when I first got exposed to it. But that's all part of it. That's part of the reach out, getting called back, familiarization with, hey, we know these guys, we've seen them train. They hosted a class for us. They all came down. Maybe we went to their station and did some training with them, that type of thing. Just bringing it all back together. Thank you.
Grosseal has always been one of the first to respond on mutual aid, and this department, the level of knowledge that they have is second to none.
And if I can, I actually witnessed this department at its one of its full strengths is when the actual bar in downtown Wyandotte burned. I believe several members were there and they did some drafting and out of the water, and there was probably 10 to 12 some of the career guys were there. They had no clue about getting water from a river up, and it was just that whole scenario like you had mentioned. First out, ready to go, ready to do the work, and that's got a whole big river there, and that's where this water was coming from. So that was awesome to see from my perspective on that side. So,
Thank you.
Examples of community relations efforts you've undertaken, developed, or implemented within your current or previous departments. You had talked about bilingual and hiring people of that nature. Let's take it out a step further, and what would your plans be for Groseville?
So as I understand, some of the community relations to get out there to expose the fire department, one of the things I'm developing right now for the city of Dearborn in my spare time is a community development, getting out there, speaking with the senior citizens, getting them part, if they're not involved in the township, getting them involved in the township, going to their meetings, getting out there the exposure. One of the things that we're having now, we're having a lot of trip and falls in the home. So I've been tasked with going to figure out why these falls are happening, and it turns out to be that a lot of times they have the rugs in front of the stove. They're coming in the middle of the morning or whatever to get a drink of water. They trip, they fall into the stove. Perhaps it could be in the afternoon, they're cooking, they're getting burned. So I've seen that as a reach out that maybe we need to have some more education to get that rug moved away. Another fine example we had was we offer a wonderful smoke detector program where we go out and install smoke alarms or detectors. And we went to this one lady's house, and she had some issues with her husband on some oxygen, and the oxygen machine was plugged into an extension cord. As your marshal will know, the extension cords can't be really used as means of permanent wiring. So we had to figure out what was going on there. And what was happening there was that she physically just could not move that couch out to undo the plug to plug the oxygen generator into the wall. So those are the type of things that perhaps, God forbid, there was ever a fire in her house, but it could be contributed to that extension cord. So that's the things I'm trying to get out into the community as far as the reach back to them, get them involved, explain to them what's going on, and what our members sitting behind me can do, and we can offer them to go, whether it's a service check on them, if we're doing something, or if we're at a call and ask them, hey, how's your smoke detectors working today? Push the button, make sure they work. If not, we use some grants, we can get some smoke detectors, or physically we have to go buy them out of our pocket and put them up there. So that's one of the things that the community or the public relations is huge to me as far as getting out, and I've been very honored to take this decision and from on the Dearborn side to move it forward.
Groseville has the oldest, on average, population among the 17 members. What special challenges does that present to you as the chief and to the department?
So probably flu time, making sure that the residents have the opportunity to their medication, make sure they're offered a flu shot, whether that's getting them involved with the local pharmacist, whether we bring them to us, whether we somehow we arrange a nurse or somebody to come with us to get these folks that maybe can't get out, if they're the aging population, to make sure that their medications are there. Maybe contact a family member who doesn't know they're sick if they had called for the rescue, and getting those shots. When COVID struck a few years ago, Dearborn actually put on a program where we actually vaccinated 60,000 people within the local area as far as coming to us to give the shots. And we had decided that we were missing a part of the elderly community or the seniors that they weren't able to drive. So we actually took it, it was the vaccine, it was the COVID vaccine on the road. We actually went to their homes, we went to the senior citizens high rises, we went to their different places of their meetings, the bingo nights, that sort of stuff, and set up a miniature vaccination stations for them and got them the resources they need that they might not be able to get on their own or have a challenge doing that.
Good.
Barry?
One of the more unpleasant tasks of the job, as with any supervisor, is discipline.
Yes, sir.
What would be your approach to discipline in the case of this department, which is a volunteer department, and would it differ, if at all, from how you would approach discipline in a paid department?
So I like to believe that there's basically three sides of a story. There's what happened, there's what happened in the middle, and then what kind of really happened on the other side. There has to be an investigation to figure out what's going on. With my hands now, in the past people that we've had to discipline or stuff, my hands are very tied as far as having a union representation, long investigations, you only have a certain amount of time in order to do different things. I'm the firm believer that people make mistakes. Sometimes it's through maybe they just possibly didn't know what was going on. Maybe nobody showed them the proper way. Or it could be just a blatant, outright, I'm just, not going to do it, and I decided, I'm just going to stay home and not do something or whatever the discipline might be. That all needs to be followed up. That needs to be looked at from all the sides. You need to get your facts. If it's a sensitive information, you may have to refer to the attorney for his opinion, his or her opinion, and then obviously have the township involved in it, and also the association, because they have a side in it as well. They've been around a long time, and maybe it's just perhaps a miscommunication of what really happened. I am proud of this record. When I was a chief in Malvindale 2 years and in Dearborn, I've never had a grievance filed against me for something being done wrong as far as disciplinary action. I've been told it's been very fair across the board, and it just comes with knowledge and bringing everybody on board and talking to them and figuring out exactly what happens.
You, once you've conducted your investigation and are trying to decide on a disciplinary measure, do you consult with, say, your top lieutenants, or do you decide this is what I want to do?
No, and that's something else I was going to mention as well. No, it would be a conglomerate between the deputy chief, the lieutenant, and perhaps maybe, if I wasn't at that particular incident or something, and the deputy chief or whatever, and he witnessed it, he might come to me and say, look, this is what happened. We need to sit down and figure out this is what happened. I've seen this happen before, or this is an ongoing issue, or this is the first time. So the ultimate decision obviously may have to lie with the chief, just because of that is the facts of being the fire chief. Yeah, it would be a conglomerate at first of getting everybody, because, again, when I go back to that communication part, possibly not being at the scene or when something happens, and if the deputy chief or lieutenant or captain was there and witnessed it, they may have more information that I was ever, perhaps it was given at first. So there's, in my realm of thinking, there's no reason to, go right off the knee and say, you're done. There has to be some type of a follow-up. There has to be an investigation. And you need to consult that member, too. There might be some things going on that the township or myself don't know or have not been told, or they're experiencing in their home life or something. So
You would consult with your top, say, lieutenants, but you would make the final decision even if it differed from what they recommended, if you thought better.
if it was for the good of the department and the good of the citizens, then yes, sir, I would.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So I guess continuing on with discipline, should all your fire personnel be treated the same, or is there a possibility that you're going to modify your rules and procedures on a case-by-case basis?
No, if you have a set of rules, then they need to be followed across the board. No matter, if you start out in the progressive, and you work your way up, unless, it's maybe it's some type of a felony or somebody, was killed or something like that, a lot of times the laws would trump our bylaws or whatever that we may have, or the township ordinances, whatever happened there. But it would start off all progressive. You need to treat, I don't like the word, the blanket policy where it covers everything, but you have to be consistent in your disciplinary to go up to help build if something was to happen in the future, that if you're talking to the attorney or you're talking to an outside individual or whatever, or perhaps the police chief or a detective who's working, there has to be consistency across the board as far as how you're treating people, especially when it comes to the disciplinary action of it.
Have you reviewed the gross seals SOPs as it relates to fire personnel?
Just a little bit, not a whole lot. So I was just able to get a hold of that. So to be honest, probably to page by page, no, sir.
Okay. Kurt?
When you communicate with all of your people, what's the best way for you? Verbal, email, text? What do you like to do? What's your strongest area in communication, if you have one?
Sure. I like to think I'm an approachable person. I like to talk verbally. I would make myself available at any point in time. I can remember, being on the volunteer side where the chief wasn't always available after 5 o'clock. So you had to wait until you could catch up to him. I'm kind of predating myself a little bit before cell phones and that type of thing. But yeah, always available. If it needs to be kind of handled in an email form, for documentation as well, then we could, do it that way. But I'm more of an approachable, let's talk, if we need to sit down and have a coffee, talk about it. Or if you just want to sit down or not talk, but verbally is my preference.
With your people, do you encourage them to put things in writing, say like on repair procedure if it's for equipment, or if there's some particular thing that maybe has a wider meaning or a bigger importance to the department?
Sure. Anything that's wrote down, perhaps if something was to happen over, say, like a weekend, and it needs to be fixed, first thing Monday morning, I would just have the members write a repair tag and be as specific as they could on there. So if I read it, I could tell this our repair person this is exactly what's going on, and then just I would have them follow up in an email to make sure I didn't miss that, and maybe explain again in there, so we would have some dual purposes of maybe getting that chainsaw fixed in a timely manner, because we've only got the one, because the other one's being broke down as well. So yeah, the more you write down, the easier it is for somebody to understand. And again, it would be relying on the officers that would be there too, as far as documentation of the stuff. So if I'm not the guy to take care of it, I could write something and they could follow up with it as well.
Which form of communication do you like the best? Verbal or email, text, some combination of it, or?
I would say verbal email,
Okay.
because then if the email is always a good one, because it's it comes right to you. But also if you pass it off and on the verbal side of it,
Yeah.
if you had mentioned it to me and I sat down at the desk and was like, oh, yep, there it is. We got to, I got to make that phone call to get that fixed.
Thank you.
Sure.
Carl?
I'd like you to identify 4 characteristics you believe are important for a leader, a chief, and a manager.
Honest, integrity, approachable, and being a good manager, being manageable, dependable.
Rank those 4 in terms of how they would apply to someone that was assessing your performance.
Trustworthy, dependable, honest. I'm trying to think of the 4th one I said.
Manager.
Yeah.
Give me an example of each of those, please.
Trustworthy, given an assignment by you folks, I need this taken done. Being able to trust me to make a good decision for you on your behalf if you can't make that meeting. Dependable, showing up on time to work, leaving when it's appropriate, not just saying I can do that tomorrow if it needs to be done today. Approachable, if you see me at the store, perhaps stopping by the fire station on your day off or something, knowing that you come in and can talk to me. And as far as being on the management, being the manageable type, having it, being able to not let you down, letting you, again, kind of going back to having that trust, to know at 3 in the morning that If I tell you I'm going to be there to help these gentlemen here take care of something, then when you pull up or you happen to get out or you happen to see one of these gentlemen's stores, like, oh, was the chief there? Yeah, he was there.
Good.
Jerry?
To remain in good standing on the department and in the long run to remain on the fire department, you have to, the requirement is attendance at 30% of the calls, going out on 30% of the calls. We also have a bunch of sub items that we track, like not only the number of calls, but the number of night calls you're on, so that you're not just attending day calls and meeting your requirement, but a sufficient number of night calls. Do you think the chief, you as chief, should be subject to the same requirement of same frequency of 30%, or because you're the chief, perhaps that shouldn't apply to you?
No, if it applies to the members, it should apply to the chief. Depending on the availability. I mean, obviously, if I'm representing a meeting for you folks or at a chief's meeting or something, and something happens, obviously I'd have to be excused and to go to the call, which it happens now. But no, if the members have a policy, then the chief should be able to make that commitment and be there to oversee and help. And it doesn't. I'm the firm believer that if somebody needs help inside and they need help putting that ceiling down and there's ample stuff, just because I'm the chief and I'm there doesn't mean I have to come in and exactly take over everything. If the deputy chief or the captain is doing a fine job, then I'm just another tool in the toolbox for him or her. I still love getting my hands dirty. I do that, and that's kind of what I've known for on the Dearborn side, that I do still show up to calls and help as much as I can. Now, obviously, there's 20 to 30 other firefighters that are showing up, and there's not a whole lot to be done a lot of times there, but they're fortunate on that side. But in smaller communities, the chief has to be a figurehead, but he also has to be able to work. And if it needs somebody to go in the back of the ambulance with the firefighters and help, then I'm there to help that as well.
Grosse Ile has a volunteer department. Obviously, we're a small township. If you'd be hired as chief, you're going to have to hold on to many hats, right? You're going to have to deal with the elected officials. Potentially, you're going to have to deal with the commission. You have your personnel. You have millions of dollars of equipment. You have residents that have issues. How do you prioritize your day or your week or your month? What's a priority to you as a chief in a small township that affects how you take care of the residents on Grosse Ile?
So the residents are the driving force of the community. We have to make sure that they're happy and they have the tools and the services that they need or that they require, not only an emergency situation, but also just stopping by the fire station as a question about a smoke detector. My day would consist of coming in, obviously on a Monday morning, see if there's any emails that needed to be attended to, perhaps from a citizen is not happy with the service that we perform for them. I'll look through that, answer any voicemails, any communications go. Perhaps if there was any members at the fire station, we'll talk to them, see how, if they had obviously I'd probably know if there was a call or something going on or during the night, but ask particularly how that call went, what I can do to help them if they're having any issues, maybe getting that piece of equipment that was forgotten, get it fixed for them and make the calls a little bit easier. And then make myself available for any of you folks that would have any questions, perhaps. Maybe you witnessed something on the fire scene that we had that you weren't quite sure of. And that doesn't need to be, I can be called at any time to answer any of your questions. I would always be available to answer a call. And then circling back to the members again, seeing if they have any ongoing issues that I can help them with. Maybe they're having some issues trying to get into a particular school that they really want to take. Maybe I could write them a letter to achieve they get into that class, taking care of the members, putting them first, getting them what they need. And along with that, again, circling back to the citizens, if they come by the fire station or if they happen to want me to call or come to speak at an event or they want to meet somewhere. And then it would be meeting with the folks at the township here too. If the clerk needed something or if I needed to come in and sign something for a bill or anything needed to be paid, working with the township manager, maybe helping him in his day if he needed something done, from the fire side. So it'd be a very busy day, keeping everybody, but that's how I see just being available in a small town in an area that would need their figurehead as a fire chief. And I can imagine the police chief is probably the same way.
Have you had the opportunity of looking at the budget of the fire department?
Just a little bit. I was just able to get my hands on that as well, as far as the things that are paid or was in the process of looking how things are allocated as far as that. And it would just, everybody has like their different budget. When I was talking with them in the original interview, I would just need to figure out, how this system worked and where it would go.
With any of your other departments, did you ever have a dedicated millage just for equipment?
Not just for equipment, no, it was strictly taken out of the budget, but there were several different line items that we could take the things out
Right.
of.
Kurt?
Did you handle the experience on the budget, Kurt?
No. You can.
Did you just jump ahead there a little bit?
No, I didn't, but go ahead. You're good.
Okay, following up with what Kurt said here, what experience have you had in preparing budgets and actually having success in getting what you're asking for through?
So on the Melvindale side, working directly as the fire chief at the time, I was directly involved with the budget in preparation. I worked hand in hand with the city manager, Rich Ortiz, at the time, or still is. I projected what things would need to be for future costs, what it was going to be cost replacing the ambulance at the time, equipment that would go along with that, a budget in preparing for, if it's say $10,000 today, 5 years now, we're probably looking at more like 25,000. So be able to appropriate that kind of money, and where is it going to come from? Is it going to come from the tax base? And that's where I would be working with a financial manager to see exactly where that money would be coming from, even if it was possible. Maybe we'd have to pull back a little bit and go a different route. On the Dearborn side, the fire chief there controls the budget 100%, but we were giving the part that I would have, so I would have the allocations of the lines and not just have a free-for-all spending whatever I wanted to. It had to go for those equipment. I had to tell him that when I was getting close that this money is not going to be, it's the time that we're in today, things are a lot more expensive. So we need to allocate a little bit more and forecast that out there and get quotes and get that so we know what's going on. More heavily on the Melvindale side than I do, because I say the fire chief controls the budget. In Dearborn, that's just his, I would say, forte. And he gives us the chunks to manage from there. But building one from ground zero or tapping onto it from Melvindale, yes, and working with a financial manager.
When you did have a budget, how successful have you been in managing the revenue side with expenditures? Have you been close, over, nowhere in the ballpark?
Very, very spot on the lines, knowing where my money was all the time. My biggest expenditure was obviously on the career side was the personnel. It was the monies, the overtime, that type of deal. So I had to keep a tight rein on as far as the allocation money that I had from the city on the overtime. And if it was getting close, then I actually had to go in front of the board, or the city council, and explain to them why I needed some more money allocated for the overtime on that to pay the firefighters. Maybe it was a large fire, or maybe it was a mutual aid event that we exhausted that account for. So we needed to replenish that. As far as asking for equipment, we were able to get a new ambulance. I was able to successful with that, utility car, and just in the process of replacing a fire engine when the merger was taking on. So still followed up with that, but it just was flipped over into Dearborn instead of coming out of the Melvindale side.
Have you been innovative at all on new equipment and new ideas? And before you answer, to my point, Gross Seal has, as Kurt mentioned, a dedicated fund, and we have the best of the best in the equipment. We don't squander the money, but we're very proactive in replacement and staying ahead of the curve, and we actually have the best of the best. So that would be a very important thing. So getting back to the question, have you been on the cutting edge of buying any innovative stuff, or do you read about it? What's your knowledge base on what's new, say, in the industry?
Sure. I was innovative on the ALS side when we were in Melvindale on the side of being the paramedics. buying the state-of-the-art monitor, cardiac monitors, the stretchers to alleviate the stress on the responders' backs, being able to alleviate that type of a situation, making sure the clean cab initiative where carcinogens weren't being brought back. There were special compartments that we were able to put stuff in to keep that away from the patient and also the firefighters. On the career side, when the firefighters go shopping, they either take the ambulance or the fire truck. So when they would do that, we had to separate the turnout gear that we wore away from the patients because perhaps they were a patient that had trouble breathing, so they were smelling the soot or whatever off our fire coats. So we had to segregate that from the patient compartments. We had compartments that were up there, so we built that into. That was one of the ideas that we came up with. One of the things that we learned that we did is we went away from all but 2 sets of the battery-powered Jaws of Life. We've got several sets that run on batteries, so you can get down to the ditches, you can take it into houses, maybe to pick things up off of people, but we still have 2 of the true sets that are on the fire engine, mechanical side, so if a battery was to fail or something, we would always have a backup. So that type of state-of-the-art, the smoke ejectors that we would have to relieve the smoke from the house, the radio communications, the air packs that we wear integrated with the radios, the pass alarm if a firefighter was to get in trouble in a house, that we'd be able to pull up on the screen of the computer in the battalion chief's car and hopefully locate where that firefighter is down if it's a large building, if the firefighters that were with them had lost eye contact with. So that's some of the cutting edge things that we're working on and we have purchased so far in Dearborn with that type of special or grant funding money that we received. So having a dedicated millage that would be for special stuff and cutting edge, yeah, that would have, and I would agree with you 100%. That's where that money should come from to make us the best department that's out there to move forward for our firefighters.
Is looking at what's out there kind of a pastime for you on your free time?
Oh, no. I've subscribed to Firehouse Engineering. I've gone to FDIC to see the most updated stuff that we have. That's a large conglomerate of firefighters and manufacturers in Indianapolis that goes out and they have the best of the best to be able to bring back to your community. Read things all the time. If I don't have a book in my hand and some type of knowledge of trying to figure things out, I'm just not feeling good that day and didn't want to read. So, but yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Carl?
You'd previously indicated the importance of investigating disciplinary matters. Throughout your career, have you ever been disciplined in any way, shape, or form for activity on or off duty?
Myself, sir?
Yes, sir.
No, sir, I have not.
Sure.
Have you ever had trouble getting along with someone at work or difficulty working for someone?
I don't believe so. I know you always have that one of the things about being a career firefighter is you're with that individual for 24 hours. Some stations are big, you can get away from them, you can go into a separate room. Sometimes it's a smaller station and you're together. So you need to work out your differences no matter what they are. Sure, have we had different conversations of, hey, I think this needs to be done, or I need maybe a little sidebar, but that's not to be done in front of the patient or on the call. We take care of it when we get back to the station or when we're coming back. Again, maybe a lack of communication or to say, hey, I did that, it worked better last time, but we're bound by protocol. So you got to, on the EMS side, you got to be able to follow those protocols, and there should be no deviation from them unless that warrants it by the medical physician that you're speaking to. So I do pride myself on it. Like I said, I'm very approachable. I get along with everybody. I treat everybody the way I want to be treated, fair, kindness. And like I said, as far as speaking with people, I love to find history. I love to talk to people, figure out what's going on. This particular island, this particular department, there's a vast amount of history that goes along with it. The members live and breathe it every day. And it would just be a total knowledge upbringing as far as talking to them and figuring out different challenges that we may have and overcome them.
You prefer to handle differences of opinions and problems on a one-on-one privately?
I think so. That's where you find out. Sometimes you need to bring somebody in to help you figure out what's going on. That could be this board if something's not going well. But I believe that you can sit down, you can hash out, and that's how I handled it. If there's any grievance in the absence of the fire chief, we would sit down, we would talk, and figure out what was going on and where the actual issue or the outlying problem was. And a lot of times it just turned out to be everybody scratched their head and said, oh, that was just a lack of communication. Sorry, we didn't see it on your side, or, oh, we see it from your side now. And that's not just from the management side, it could be from the association or the union side as well. Maybe the management is just not thinking clearly on that side.
Thank you.
Chief Murray is your supervisor?
Fire chief, direct supervisor, yes.
Right. So I know Chief Murray just because of my involvement with Downriver Mutual Aid. So if I would call up Chief Murray tomorrow and say, what attribute would you best describe Stephen for? What do you think he does really well? What do you think he would tell me?
I would say when I does his job well, doing what needs to be done, the tasks that he gives to me, hard worker, strong worker, like a challenge, truthful, faithfulness come through for him, not letting him down. When he's not there or he has me do something, I am representing him and I'm representing the city at all times. And that I can say the mayor's office and obviously the township. So no matter what move I make or do, it's going to have some type of direct reflecting on himself or the fire department or the cities that we serve.
What do you think he would tell me if I would ask him as to what you need to improve upon?
I would say improving as far as when given it a task to get it done, and then when it gets to let people have some time to divulge the information, figure out what's going on, and let it go. When he gives me an assignment, I don't want to disappoint him. So I want to make sure that when I get the stuff, I get it off to the right people, help them with it whenever we do. So I come back and then he'll follow up with me and say, hey, where are we at? And then I have to make another call, figure out what's going on. And I would just say the parts of just let people, do their thing that they need to do, and then they're going to get back with you. I just don't like to have that hanging out there in the presence of, not doing a job that, that you need to be done rather quickly.
Bert?
Obviously, you're familiar with what this job entails. Do you have any basis that would either prevent you or not allow you to have to proceed with a reasonable accommodation in this type of work?
No, sir. I'm none at all.
Sometimes the hours of this position are extensive, and I've known that our chiefs in the past they've been on site for like 24 hours as the condition may require. What's your thought about that? If you're needed, are you going to be there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any time, day of the hour. By looking at the rank structure that it's there, you have some fine and capable officers that are on the fire department currently, and if there needed to be, a rotation basis out, I can remember several times of being on that volunteer fire department, being up all night, having to tend to get to school the next morning, but sometimes things they have to wait. Family has to wait. The emergency happens; it needs to be taken care of. So as far as being available, yes, I currently do it now. I've been gone as much as, almost 24, more than 24 hours away. Wife understands, it's the profession that we've chosen.
So you'd consider that part of the job on an as-needed basis?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Earl?
Assuming you receive the position, you're coming to this department as an outsider, and you have roughly 20 people that you're going to be working with. You're also going to be working with the chief of police, and in Groseal, our police are also among the first responders. So let's add another 20 plus people to the mix there. Then you have to work with the township board, so you're close to 55, 54, 55. You come here with some people that maybe wanted your job, or some people that feel they could do a better job, or some people that just welcome you with open arms and look forward to working with you and learning from you. How do you cross those Rubicons in order to make this a successful department and be the best department it can be?
What we've been talking about earlier, it's the respect coming in. When I can use an example as far as coming from a fire department with 16 full-time firefighters at 2.2 square miles, coming to a bigger city fire department with 150 individuals, with approximately 30-some square miles between Melvindale and Dearborn. I had to make myself available for them. I had to be able to show them that, number one, they're the most important people. I'm there to help them do their job, get them what they need, and be approachable in that. Be an outside thinker to help them, to be able to help them get through their day, get through their challenges that they might have that's going on. I work directly with the police department now, both in Melvindale and Dearborn currently. I welcome any help that's on the scene. My biggest thing is that everybody goes home safe at the end of the call or while we're on the call. Again, I had mentioned these wonderful officers that you have here, knowing that probably some of them do not want somebody from the outside to come in at all. But I believe I've been in their shoes before. I've walked in their shoes. I've been that volunteer. Been able to fortunate to get hired on the career fire department with my education, and this is the time that I want to give back because I remember those roots, and that's kind of where I started, and that's why I want to go out and be that helpful, that knowledgeable person that's there to help them get through their day. And I hope, if chosen for the position, I hope to work greatly with the association. If somebody doesn't care for me, that's okay too. We can work through that. And I would never treat anybody differently or change just because they didn't like the color tie I wore tonight. I understand that. Never going to please everybody, but I certainly hope they would give me a chance to work with them and to help them to actually show and prove what I can do and what I can help them. And I'm not that bad guy. I'm somebody there to help them.
I'm good.
Jerry?
Other than the fact that we're a volunteer department, what are the differences, if any, between the Groseal department as you know it and your current department?
The only difference I would say would be just the amount of probably the call volume that we do on a daily basis, and the membership as far as how many firefighters, Dearborn employees versus the township here has. Again, I had mentioned there's absolutely no difference. They put their bunker coats on the same way we do. We go to the same training. We sit. I have a lot of connections still with my friends that chose physicians and physical therapists for a career and still run on the volunteer fire department out there. There's absolutely no difference. Whether male or female, we're all the same. We do the same thing. We go through the same door. We're still the same paramedics. We're still the same EMTs. We learned everything together. It's just everybody has a different drive. Their community has maybe a little different as far as being able to fund a career fire department, where some of them have, you're still your paid on call type departments. So to answer your question, really no difference other than probably the call volume and just the members present.
One of the questions that they ask on the sheet is, and I'm going to read it verbatim, it says, how is Groseal different from the community your current department? How is Groseal different from the community your current department policies? How do these differences impact your policies? I think what they're trying to say is you have policies right now, and obviously with the city of Dearborn, obviously we have policies that are in place that haven't been in place, that have been tried and tested. How do those affect the way that if you would become chief, would you work with the policies that are in place, or would you try to apply policies from your former employee in your present position as chief?
The policies and procedures that you would have on file here or on staff that the members have come and known to use, they're there for a reason, and there's a reason why they were wrote. So there's no sense of bringing something that doesn't even apply, say, from Dearborn to, say, Groseal for any reason. There would be two different entities. Obviously, one being an island and one being a city. So maybe how they approach a house fire as far as the initial attack with one engine, I'm just making this up, say one engine and a rescue that would be there, compared to Dearborn, where they would use the first engine pulls past the house and they put a ladder truck in front. How do we do that? If that doesn't apply, then there would be no reason to bring that over here. You would simply work with the policies and procedures that you had here. And again, I would look to the members for the directions of, hey, this is not just quite working out. What would be your thoughts of changing this around, maybe tap some experience or something like that. No, we've tried that before, it doesn't work. This is a situation we stick on. If that works for the department and that works for the community, then there's absolutely no reason to change that policy.
All right. Kurt?
Are you familiar with the pay and the benefits? Has that all been explained to you?
No, sir, it has not.
So you obviously have questions about them.
Sure, I have a few questions, but I don't know if it's appropriate now or later.
Probably not now, but
Sure.
Just curious. It was not explained to you in the beginning.
Correct.
Thank you.
Sure.
Earl, any follow-up questions?
I do, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm big on training, education, staff and command. Day one, job one, what are you going to do to determine what the department needs for training and what they need for education, and who goes to staff and command?
So I think day one, I would, if offered the opportunity, I would like to reach out to my officers, bring them in, and kind of get to know them and figure out what direction and what education everybody has. Obviously, a newcomer coming in, I'm sure that there's files, and there'd be certificates, stuff like that on the computer, whatever, see what everybody has. And start getting those people, if they don't have it or could never get into it, start pushing them towards that way. Grozio might have a different attitude of saying, yep, firefighter 1 and firefighter 2, all the members have that, we're good. We're trying to get some more EMTs, so we need to buckle down on that. As being an alumni from the staff and command myself, the importance of that class, phenomenal, absolutely. There is a little bit of a wait time because of COVID, it's getting some people in there. But yes, very imperative for the command officers to have that and then get it down to the firefighters as well. It's very, very important. One of the requirements I saw for this position was the Executive Fire Officer Command and National Fire Academy. As of yesterday, that class is still blocked because of the COVID. They can't get everybody through. It's a very short time. I'm still waiting to hear back from the Naval Academy, Naval Academy for the emergent class that I keep getting pushed off because of the COVID. So understandably, all that it's important to have that, and that would be just coming in and looking through and talking with these gentlemen and ladies and figuring out where they need to be and to go. Probably in every fire department we have a training officer, so I would look at that experience well for that person and say, what do we need to do to get these people, if any, to get them up. Maybe there's some more special rescue classes for the islands that need to be done off the rescue side, so we can get involved in that. Maybe some other mutual aid partners will offer that for us. So yes, training would probably be one of the first things to accomplish to make sure that we're above and beyond what the state asks us to do.
Two things in your professional career that you have regrets over, if you could do differently.
I would say the moving up. Let me back up a little bit. Through when I was progressing up through Melvindale, there was a lot of different approaches you can go. You could be the driver of the fire engine. You could be the officer. You could be different. You had different positions that you could go depending on your seniority. The workings of a fire engine and the workings of the administrative part of it are obviously two different things. So when you have those type of deals, when they come up, I chose to do the fire officer, obviously become the driver, because I thought that was the most effective way to come up, to know the fire engine and then be the operator and then become the commander of the truck per se, or the officer. I was at a younger age, I was offered the command position to achieve and to be that leader, because people saw some good things in me to be able to lead the department. And I often wonder, standing back, that if I had stuck around at that company officer level and got a little bit more experience before I went into the administrative part of it, maybe I would be a little bit faster on the the budgets when it comes through, or whatever. There's a lot of stuff I've had to learn, and everybody learns through that. So I would just say basically just doing a position like I have been doing for a while now, getting comfortable with that, applying that knowledge base, and then moving up. As far as the negative side of just kind of holding back a little bit and letting time build upon that.
Second example.
Second example, the kind of to back up a little bit, when I was being on the fire, wanting to get on the fire department, my dad and grandpa, we actually lived in a township called Hamburg out by Brighton. So we were there, but you had to be 21 years old to be on that fire department. But on the Brighton side, when you first started out, you could be 18 when you go through, because that's legal age you could be to be a firefighter 1 in the state of Michigan. So I held off a little bit and waited, and then I moved into the Brighton side of it. And I often wondered that if I would have stayed on it and stayed with my dad and my grandpa, would that have let me somewhere else on the true volunteer part of it, and maybe done a different career path than being on the fire side, and fast tracking to what I eventually wanted to do and did accomplish.
2 examples of things that you are proudest of in your career.
Proudest in career, I would have to say raising to the rank of chief in Malvindale. When I first walked in there, I knew that's what I wanted to do, and it took me a few years to do that, obviously, because I'm not going to promote the newest guy in. And I wished that department was still there, and perhaps, but it was not beneficial for the citizens because of the funding and stuff that was there. So it'd be kind of a selfish thing to think of there, but becoming the chief there. And in my career, I've had several life-saving awards done that I made a difference in somebody's life, and was able to have them share their family to move through. I just happened to be provided the right tools at the right time to be there to pull somebody through a bad day in their life.
Last question is, we're familiar with your credentials. You've spoken eloquently for a little over an hour today. I want to know here and here why we should hire you. I don't want to hear about credentials, education, or anything like that. I want to hear from your mind and your heart why you over the other 27 people.
Again, it comes back to being taught as a young man about giving back to your community. And I see this as a fine, outstanding community. And from my heart, I would like to be part of it. I often, different avenues driving around, different calls and stuff, I've always marveled. This township being, it's I don't want to say it's an independent, because it's not, but it's on an island. And I always thought the resources that are here and the people live here were so polite. Stopping at the store, stopping at the fire station to talk to the guys, police station, whatever. I just want to be part of that. I've seen both sides of it. My mind tells me this is the direction to go. I want to give back to the community. It's a wonderful community to be at. The members are great people. I've worked with them a few years ago. And I think this is the right fit for me. I think this is the time to make the move. And there's only a few times in your life that you feel that in your stomach, in your mind. Talked to my wife quite a bit about it. Supports 100%. And I just think this is where I would like to be, and to interface with you folks on a daily basis or weekly basis, whatever you might expect of me.
Good.
If you are offered the job, when would you be able to start?
I would just like to give a 2 weeks notice to my current employer, if that would be feasible. If not, then I certainly could be approachable of changing something differently.
Well, I echo Carl's statement. Obviously, we've had the opportunity of listening to answer some of these questions. I think you've seen or heard these questions before. But I guess if you could reconcile something for me, being an island resident for 57 years, I've never known us not to have a chief that lived on this island, that had the ability to make every call if they needed to. Behind you, you have interim Chief Camilleri, and behind you to your right, you have former Chief Murdoch, right? So when I was supervisor, I got a call from a resident that they were concerned their child had been locked in a room. It was an infant, and the mother was hysterical, the father was hysterical. I asked him if he had called 911. He said, I have 911 on one phone, but I have my wife's phone on the other. You need to help me out. And while I was talking to him, Chief Murdoch was already in his driveway. And that resident felt like he had been taken care of immediately. You talk about rotations, you talk about coverage, you talk about night calls, you talk about 24-hour calls. How do you reconcile for me that you're not the first on scene every time there's a call on Grosse Ile. Because historically, you know, if there was a call last night, probably interim Chief Camilleri was there. Chief Murdoch was always there. How do you reconcile my concern that you're not going to be the first one there? And it's now a rotation, so you say on the third day I'll have night call, but on the fourth and fifth day I won't. That's something that I've never experienced on Grosse Ile after all these years. How do you reconcile my concern?
I would say your concern is a valid one. But like I had mentioned before, you have some wonderful people, as you mentioned the chiefs before, that are here and would be able to be there if I was not here or living, you know, obviously somewhere else. That's what makes the department go around, is people are, sometimes they're close, sometimes they're not, sometimes they're here, you know, that type of deal that you have. The faith in your officers that you have, whether it obviously being the fire chief, if he's not there, the faith in the deputy chief, former chiefs, that type of thing. Those are what's instilled in us to give back to the community, so we're going to be there to answer that call for you. I would assure you that nothing would change as far as people's calls being answered in a timely manner. It could be where I could be on my way in, perhaps say driving down the road and come across the car accident that would be there, or hear that same call come in and could be the first one there, and you know, be going through the door with the deputy chief at the same time, you know, trying to render that aid to that person. So it is comfort knowing obviously your chief is down the street, but you would have things in play that you certainly have now that would be able to take and put in front of that barrier, such as your existing officers or your firefighters that would be there to be able to step in for the moment. I can rest assured to you, if I was to receive the call or whatever, I would drop whatever I was doing, obviously, and start heading this way, being in contact with, you know, my officers or our dispatch person or the police that would be there.
Because historically, our department was made up of volunteers that, for the most part, lived as well as worked on Grosse Ile.
Sure.
And that's changed over time, right? That's not as easy as it once was. So now we rely upon our chief and our fire marshal, because they're really the paid employees. I mean, you know, Officer Langley, I'm sure he runs during the day more than most, right? Because he's here and he's basically one of our paid employees. And so is the chief, right? You know, weekend calls, night calls, those are all something that make this community a special place, because there is a familiarity with the people that are servicing our residents, right? So again, I think that's one of the issues that's the elephant in the room, because it's the first time we're going down that path, potentially. And it's going to be an important component if you would be hired to try to address how you're going to make the residents feel comfortable.
Sure.
Kurt, do
I have nothing. All done.
you have any questions of us?
No, I was instructed there's going to be another couple meetings hereafter, and then a decision will be made.
Well, as you indicate, or here at the very beginning, we have another candidate that we're going to interview.
Yes, sir.
This commission will then make a recommendation to the board. Then it'll be the pleasure of the board as to how they want to proceed with that recommendation.
Perfect.
You guys set? We appreciate you coming in. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Can I approach and shake hands?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We're going to take a 5-minute break. And then the other issue is the fact that we only have this room for another 35 minutes. ZBA is going to conduct their meeting here, so we will start. They're not coming in?
They decided to let this meeting proceed
That works.
to the end, and CBA will meet.
That's even better. All right, so we'll take a 5-minute break. We'll come back and we'll proceed with our next interview. answer the question to your best abilities. When you're done with that answer, then we will continue with the next question. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any questions of me?
I do not.
All right, so we're going to start. Carl, if we could start on your end.
David, as an introduction, tell us about yourself, your career, and your individual or private.
Sure. So my name is David Heavener. I was born and raised in Livonia. I spent my entire firefighting career at the Livonia Fire Department. However, I got into the EMS field. Prior to that, I worked for a private ambulance company downriver here called Medic One Ambulance Service, where I spent about 13 years and ended my employment there as the chief operating officer of that company upon the sale of that company. Now, my career in private EMS overlapped a little bit with my fire service. In 1995, I hired into the Livonia Fire Department as a full-time career firefighter. Worked my way up through the ranks at Livonia, and in 2012 I became the training coordinator for Livonia Fire Department. The last 4 years of my career I spent as the fire chief of Livonia Fire Department, at which point last April I retired due to natural defined benefit retirement related issues. My time was up essentially, so it was the most financially responsible decision for myself to go ahead and retire at that point. So I did that in April. I retained employment with the city of Livonia till January of 2023 as a consultant for the incoming administration for the Livonia Fire and Rescue. I started off my education at Schoolcraft College back in 1992 to go to the Fire Academy, and then from there I went to Henry Ford Community College to receive my associate degree, and then later I went to the University of Cincinnati where I earned my bachelor's degree in fire science. From there, since then, I've also attended Eastern Michigan's Fire Staffing Command and was a proud graduate of Class 18. Family life, I am married. I have 2 children. My son is my oldest, who is a full-time firefighter for Ferndale Fire Department. And my daughter just recently graduated from Northern Michigan University this few weeks ago, actually. So essentially my wife and I are empty nesters at this point. My wife works from home. We were married as high school sweethearts and have been married since for about 27 years at this point.
Jerry?
How'd you learn about this job? And it seems like you're an empty nester and comfortably retired. What's your interest in this job?
So being an empty nester still in my 40s is a unique opportunity. I was able to hire in a fantastic fire department. Livonia Fire Department was a phenomenal career. I have absolutely zero regrets of working for the community of Livonia. It was a phenomenal opportunity that I was able to hire. I hired at 21 years old in one of the best fire departments at the time in my view. When I retired, I was able to, I was presented with the opportunity to do some things that I had not spent much time doing along my career path, such as teaching different programs and getting involved in some very unique programming and presentation avenues that wasn't really a possibility for me as a fire chief. When I was the fire chief of Livonia, I was very committed to being the chief of Livonia and not being too pulled in too many different directions and getting involved in different type of activities. I wanted to make sure that Livonia, the members of the community, the members of the fire department were my number one priority and only priority. So upon my retirement, I got involved in a program called the Yellow Rose. Those of us in the fire service may have heard of it. Basically what the Yellow Rose is a initiative from the Fire Chiefs Association in conjunction with Belfour Restoration. And the idea was to put together a presentation that we could go out into the fire service and talk about a very difficult topic, and that is the mental health and mental wellness, suicide prevention in the fire service. So what I was able to do for the first time in a long time was I was able to focus on going around to different fire departments, different community organizations, and talking about the mental health and mental wellness that every one of us, I'm not sure how many people in the room here today, but I don't need to ask. Almost every one of us in this room today has been faced with some type of mental health, mental wellness challenge, either personally or with somebody that is very closely related to us. And it's a topic that in the fire service for so long we've avoided talking about. And the goal of the Yellow Rose is to remove the stigma around the discussion related to mental health and mental wellness. So I was able to partake in some partnerships and go around the state of Michigan and present the Yellow Rose presentation to many different fire departments, many different community organizations, and then branch that off into other areas such as the housing community, and which I'm sure I'll get an opportunity to talk about a little bit later, and as well as code enforcement. So mental health is a very real challenge that we all face, and it became a passion of mine. And I was able to really focus on a lot of that in the last year since I retired. The Fire Chiefs, more direct answering your question, the Fire Chiefs Association sends out postings and notifications of different potential job offerings that are available for chiefs jobs throughout the country. And I routinely pay attention to those. And it's important to know that I am not in the hunt or the search for just any fire chief's job. I am in the hunt and the search for a fire chief's job that I can become a part of the community and show and have a real passion for not only the community members, the community structure, but most importantly, the firefighters that serve the community. So I'm looking for, in my next move in my career advancement, I'm looking for an opportunity in a fire department that is the right fit. I'm a firm believer that it has to be a right fit both on your side and on my side of the employment structure. I'm only interested in considering opportunities in communities that I can see picking up my family and moving and living in and being a part of, an active community member.
It's great to be retired and have all these other opportunities. Do you think you might get stretched too thin if you're doing some of the Yellow Rose and some other things while trying to be a chief?
So the foundation of the Yellow Rose, that's a great question. And that is the same situation that I was faced with in Livonia. And I am committed to making the fire chief's job my only priority, my number one priority. The Yellow Rose presentation, how it's designed, is it's designed to be delivered to community groups and to pass along the information and the conversation. And it's really, the design is to plant a seed around growing those roses, if you will, in other communities so other people can then take that information and run with it. This is by no means a full-time job. It is it is something that I've done and found great appreciation for with respect to people that are dealing with mental health and mental wellness. I do not see any issues with being able to juggle both.
Tell us a little bit about what you know about Grow Seal as a community.
So since I have initially applied for Grow Seal and held my initial interview here, I've spent several different weekends coming out and just perusing through the community, having lunch at a local establishment. Actually, this weekend I visited the golf course, the golf club, a couple of different of the yacht clubs in the area. Looked at some different housing options around the area. So I understand that there's some challenges specific to Grow Seal. Obviously, it's being an island. There's only a couple ways on and off of it, off the island. There's a large potential fire risk in the marinas and the yacht clubs with everybody's boats and toys that they love and enjoy. So I also understand and realize that about 30% of the community is in the excess of 65 years old, which also will pose challenges to the community moving forward with regard to having somewhat of an aging community. I think the last numbers posted about another 17% of the residents are over 55, with only about 18% or so under 18 years old. So there are some definite challenges that the community will face moving forward in the future. Unlike any fire department, like every fire department, I should say, every fire department faces challenges, and those challenges will be ever changing. And it's important that whoever the fire chief, the fire administration, the community administration are routinely looking at out-of-the-box solutions to stay ahead of potential problems that the community may face. It's so much better and so much more proactive to have some foresight of what's coming, opposed to trying to respond and react to situations. So many times in the fire service, firefighters are geared to respond to emergencies when they happen. a lot of energy and a lot of effort from an administrative standpoint can help alleviate some of those responses that firefighters will face throughout time by planning, by being involved in the community and making sure that the community is involved in the fire department. So understanding that it's roughly 8 miles long, 3 miles wide, has a small airport on it, I understand that there's challenges when there's a large residential community here on the island that obviously has a great deal of pride, a great deal of history, and a great deal of support throughout the community. Just driving around the community and popping into even Kroger's, for example, you can see and you can feel the great sense of pride that the community has, and that's important to make sure that the community never takes for granted or loses sight of.
Kurt?
Grosse Seal is a isolated community, as you referenced before, because of the bridges, and we have 14 islands, and some inhabited, some uninhabited. Do you have any experience in marine recovery or marine firefighting capabilities or rescue? Have you had any experience in that line of work?
So in Livonia, that is where I've done the majority of my career. We have 2 small lakes. We have Newburgh Lake and Nankin Lake. We do have they are sports related, not all sports, so they're not power motor accessible, but we do have kayaking, we have paddle boating, stand-up paddle boarding, that kind of thing. So we do have some rescue that occurs in there. A lot of people go out and ice fish in the winter. Is it extensive experience? No, it's not. But like any fire administration, a key to resolving that is to make sure, I would make sure that I surround myself with people that have a deep knowledge and expertise in that area.
All right. Carl?
Township government consists of a supervisor, treasurer, clerk, and 4 trustees. We also have township manager, and you would be working with them collectively. What is your experience with working with government officials? Whether Livonia, I believe, is a city that has a strong council. How do you reconcile working as a chief and having to butt heads perhaps with local, and what's your experience with that?
Sure. So in Livonia, we have a very strong mayor and a very strong council. And collectively, they don't always see eye to eye. They come from different ideologies, from a political background, if you will. But luckily enough, throughout my career, we have had a fantastic amount of support in the community throughout both business, residential, and of course in the political arena as well. As the chief, I was appointed by the mayor and work hand in hand with the city council. It is an absolute critical component of being a fire chief. You have to be able to work hand in hand with all of the stakeholders throughout the community, especially the elected officials. So I've had a very good working relationship with every one of our city council members, our mayor, mayor's staff, other department heads. As a matter of fact, as a testament to some of the success that we've had in Livonia, during COVID, when COVID hit, Livonia was hit extraordinarily hard. Livonia had the highest death rate per capita in the state of Michigan outside the city of Detroit. Livonia had the first COVID patient that Michigan saw, and we were very much a hub of response during the COVID emergency. What we have in Livonia was a large number of senior residents. And what we did is we wanted to make sure that we provided our community with not only access to knowledge, but access to testing and access to vaccinations. So what we did collectively as a group of department heads, city elected officials, the mayor's office certainly, we formed a committee called Together Livonia Cares. And what that did, I was in charge of that committee from a response perspective for COVID. And what we did is we went door to door to our senior complexes throughout the community, offering testing initially, offering hand sanitizer, literature, gloves, masks, you name it, to try to make our residents feel more comfortable. Once the vaccine became available, Livonia decided to go ahead and take on the capability. We have the capabilities in Livonia. We're all paramedics, so we have the ability to administer vaccine. So what we did is we templated what we did with the testing procedure, and we went door to door offering our senior population vaccinations. That grew into a different opportunity where we were able to secure additional vaccination doses through the Wayne County Health Department, to where we were able to open a vaccination clinic, and we vaccinated our residents that were over 65 years old. To date, or as of last year, we successfully vaccinated over 20,000 vaccines for our residents. We administered to them directly. Now, I will not tell you I'm a fire guy. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a science guy. Whether you're pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine wasn't really the point at the time. We had a community that was scared. They were isolated, and what they saw in their fire department was a group of people that they trusted. The fire service is probably the most, in my opinion, obviously I'm a little bit biased, but I don't think too many people will argue that it most likely is one of the most revered professions in the world. And what our residents noticed is they noticed their firefighters coming to their assistance. I can't tell you that we prevented any COVID cases. I can't tell you that the vaccine was good or bad. What I can tell you is that together Livonia Cares, a collective group of department heads, came together and provided hope for those residents that were isolated and scared. And the only way that that was able to be successful was through strong partnership building throughout all of the department heads and elected officials. So my experience with working with elected officials is a very positive one. And even those that don't necessarily agree with some of the initiatives that have been set forth, it's been a very strong, positive working relationship.
As you know, David, we're primarily a volunteer fire department. Have you had any experience dealing with a volunteer department, and what are the similarities and differences between a volunteer and a paid department?
So the majority of my experience with volunteer work is with our CERT team. We have a CERT team, a citizens response team, that is in the excess of 40 people. Those CERT members work for free. They work because they care about their community. They take a great deal of pride in helping. Their payment is filling their hearts, filling their own personal bucket back. And that's what they take great pride in. And we saw that truly come forward through our COVID response, where our CERT members stepped up and they volunteered to help at those COVID clinics for free, working side by side with our paramedics. And it really did give me an opportunity to see firsthand on a daily basis what that real deep passion and desire for service is to our brothers and sisters in our community. And the respect and appreciation that I have for people that volunteer their time for very little financial reward is unbelievable with what I've seen people put forward in that effort. The similarities are we all care about our community. We get compensated in different fashions. In a career department, you get compensated by pay and benefits. In a volunteer department, you get compensated in different fashions, like I mentioned, filling back that personal bucket. I think that there isn't one right way for a community to offer the service to their community. I think it's important to know that we have to, as a community, look at what works. And if the system that you currently have works well, then why change it? I think in your mission statement, it acknowledges that that you have a desire to remain a volunteer fire department until a time comes that needs to be changed. The $1 million question is, when is that time? And I don't know that anybody can have a crystal ball and tell what that time is. I think what's massively important is that we remain flexible enough to have the idea that when things work, they work, and why change them? And when things don't work, we have to have stakeholders in the room, to have